Welcome to a special edition of Community Connections titled Local Legends, where we are honoring and want to learn from extraordinary people who have transformed systems and connected thousands of people to life-sustaining resources over the course of their careers. So today I have with me Sharmain Matlock-Turner. Ms. Matlock-Turner is the CEO of the Urban Affairs Coalition. She began her tenure in March 1999 with the special distinction of being the first woman to lead the coalition. The Urban Affairs Coalition, formerly GPUAC, unites government, business, neighborhoods, and individual initiatives to improve the quality of life in the region, build wealth in urban communities, and solve emerging issues, including improving life chances for youth and young adults, building wealth in low-income communities, forging strategic partnerships, and strengthening the nonprofit sector through fiscal sponsorship. Ms. Matlock-Turner has received numerous awards. Ms. Matlock-Turner holds a BS degree in education from Temple University. In 2005, she was one of the 3 Philadelphia nonprofit leaders selected to receive a scholarship to the Harvard Business School Strategic Perspectives in Nonprofit Management. In 2014, she received an honorary doctorate of humane letters from Pierce College. So, Ms. Matlock-Turner, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, and I appreciate that kind introduction. Thank you, Katrina.
So you were on this episode before, Community Connections. Now you are here and you have given me the honor of interviewing for Local Legends. So I really, really appreciate that and really wanted to take some time to just highlight the amazing career that you've had. So I'd like to start with asking you, what led you to work in the nonprofit space?
Well, I think I've always been someone who was what's known as a doer. I get
Mhm,
outside as a kid, join together with other people, and say, okay, what can we do
mhm,
together to really make things change? I was very active in my church. I was on the usher board
mhm,
and the choir. And so it was always a part of sort of like organizing people. And when you're involved with organizations, there's always a part of it to say, what can I do for others? How can I help other people? Whether it's girls selling Girl Scout cookies and raising money for the Girl Scouts, or knocking on doors for my usher board, raising money in order for us to give food to those who were less fortunate. There was always an activity. And when people said to me, Charmaine, would you come join us? Or if I saw something and asked other people to join, it just happened. And so there was always something about me that said, you can do a lot of really great things if you
mhm.
really join with other people. And I just always cared about what was going on in my neighborhood.
So it sounds like you had a lot of natural skill sets, right, that led you to be successful in the work that you do. But can you talk a little bit as well about some of the things that perhaps you learned and some of the ingredients that you've seen make people successful and effective over the years?
Yeah, I think some of the things that really make people successful over the years is to be very comfortable with knowing what you don't know. A
Okay.
lot of times we feel as if, okay, we've got to be perfect. And so we sort of like fill gaps with things that maybe aren't accurate or completely true, just in order for us to feel as if, people are going to pay attention to us. I
Mhm,
found that people really pay attention to you when you ask really good questions, when
mhm,
you're curious, when
mhm,
you're engaged, when
mhm,
you're genuine. That's when people really pay a very close attention to you. And so for me, I've always tried to be the person who says, tell me, what can I do? How can
mhm,
I do it better? How can I
mhm,
be more effective?
mhm.
And if there are things that I can share with you, if there's advice that I can give, I'm certainly open to that. But it's always been about the fact that, it's not just about me, it's about we. And when we can join together and work on things together, then in the end, I think that we can get a lot of things done. But being a good listener, making sure that you're asking really great questions. I had a mentor that said to me, Charmaine, the smartest person in the room is not the person who has the answers, it's the person who
Mm,
has and ask the right questions. And I remember just sort of recently seeing something about AI, that really AI is about being the person with the right questions, not the
mhm.
person who necessarily has the answer. We can Google and do all kinds of things, look at encyclopedias to find answers, but if we don't know what we're really looking for, then in the end, we aren't going to really gather the information that we need to get the things done that we know we want to do.
So you talked a little bit about getting the right answers, asking the right questions, and what comes up for me in your bio and what I know about your work is the partnerships that you created. So if you could talk a little bit about those partnerships, what were the questions that you asked to help to get at and really start to tackle some really big challenges in the city?
Right. Well, I've had an opportunity to work on some really major partnerships, and
Mhm,
I'm excited to say that one of the ones that I worked on, a new report just came out recently as it relates to poverty.
mhm,
Council President Darrell Clark, former Councilwoman Keona Sanchez, along with Alan Dom, along with other members of the community. I served as co-chair along with Mel Wells from One Day at a
mhm,
Time
mhm,
to really look at the issue of poverty. Many people had talked in Philadelphia about Philadelphia being the poorest large city in the country, and so people were always sort of talking about, oh, it's 25%, and I said, you know what? Let's talk about, I'd like to know about the people. How many
mm,
people are we talking about? And so the number was around 400,000 people. Okay, so now we know it's 400,000 people. How many of those people are children? And about 35 to 40% of that number were children. How many of them are seniors? About another 20% were seniors. So that meant that the number in the working age population, if you believe that you can really attack poverty by dealing with families and breadwinners of families, that you know that if you can get a mom or dad into a job or a business that is going to be a family sustaining wage, you're not only going to help them get out of poverty, but ultimately the children are going to get out of poverty. So when
that's
you
right.
look at the numbers that came out of the Census Bureau last week, we have almost reduced poverty in Philadelphia by 100,000 people.
Wow.
And that is because we knew that there was a multiplier effect if you could
Mhm,
really find and support those who are workers in Philadelphia. So I just want to thank those hundreds of people who came forward and everybody every day who works on these issues with too often a response that says, oh, are you really changing anything? Are you really making a difference? To everybody who's been working on reducing poverty and creating real opportunities for families, I just want to say thank you, thank you, thank you. I know we have more work to do. You know, there are still too many people in poverty. You know, still the number is around 250,000, but that's a lot different, okay, than, or 250 to 300,000, but that's a lot different than the 400,000 we had just in 2019. So we're making progress, and the idea is to really understand what were the keys to that success and to
mhm.
make sure that we're digging deep enough in those changes so that people can't come along and just pull up those changes because the roots are too close to the surface.
Mm. Yeah, I think that so you brought up a couple of things I just want to highlight. So you talked about the population in a way that you broke down who are the actual people we can target in terms of increasing income, right? And you talked about the multiplier effect. I think what's so important about what you said is because you were able to hone in specifically and be more strategic in helping that particular group of people, right? And then as you're explaining what you're talking about, you had hope in your voice when you said it. It wasn't about a we're hitting a wall and this is the way it is. It was let's dissect this and see what we can change. So I really appreciate you sharing the details of that level of thinking.
You're
And I think
welcome.
that that'll inspire folks to think a little bit more deeply about these large problems that feel insurmountable. Can you talk a little bit about perhaps one of the things that you feel particularly proud of that you accomplished and why?
Well, there are certainly a lot of things. First, I'm a wife and mother. So, in the midst of doing all this other things and grandmother, I am very happy that I still have a wonderful family. My
Mhm.
husband and I will be celebrating our 41st wedding
Oh my
anniversary this
goodness.
year. And I
Congratulations.
still have friends that I went to college with that I get a chance to connect with. So, it is, and I say that in all seriousness too, because it is
Mhm,
important for those of us who are in the sort of helping,
mhm,
supporting space to make sure that we take time to always be nurturing ourselves, to
mhm.
make sure that we're getting that love and support from others, and that makes a huge difference. But one
Yeah.
of the things I am really, really proud of is the work that I did as co-founder of the West Oak Lane Charter School.
Okay.
When I started working in the legislature, my first job was working for a state representative. And one of the first calls I got in the office for constituent service, as it's called, or
Mhm.
community service was, "Hello, I'm calling because I want to transfer my son from the neighborhood school to a school in Northeast Philadelphia." And I was like, okay, well, let me check in on that and let me try to
Mhm.
find out. And so I found out from talking to other legislative staffers that that is something that the superintendent of schools could actually do for a state legislator. So we
Okay.
called, and in that particular instance, that person was able to get the transfer. But as I started to really get into sort of understanding systems and structure and not just outcomes, I was
Mm.
wondering, well, is that something that could happen for anyone? Did you have to know an elected
Mhm.
official, or did you
Right.
have to have a
Right.
connection in order to receive that support and that service? And so, what I found was that as people were looking at trying to expand opportunities within the public school system, that charter schools could be an important part of creating new options for
Mhm.
families. And though there was a lot of pushback because initially it was seen as, is this something that's against teachers or something? Is I
Right.
said, no, this is not. This is about creating creative ways for us to expand opportunities
Mhm.
within the public system. And so out of that, I did community meetings, I talked to people, I did surveys. I found out that probably about 80% of the teachers who had children, they were not going to neighborhood schools. They were either going
Wow.
to special admit schools, or they were
Mhm.
living outside of the city going to suburban schools. And
Mhm.
I said, I'm not mad at them. Everybody, including me, wants to create real opportunities for my kids. I was
Right.
ultimately able, when my children were ready to go to school, to be able to get them into the school of my choice because I knew
Yeah.
all of the inside work that you needed to do in order to make that happen. So
Right.
now I had the chance to do it for everyone else out in the open and really create those opportunities. So when the charter school legislation passed, which I was a part of along with Congressman Evans, I said it's one thing to get something written down. It's another thing to say, can you prove that concept is true, Charmaine? And I
Mm.
said, we're gonna we're gonna see whether or not we can build a school and make a school. I'm happy to say that 27 years later, we
Wow.
have a fantastic school in West Oak Lane Charter School. We
Mm.
have our first graduate of West Oak Lane Charter School who's now gone on high school, college, and is a teacher
Wow.
at our school. And I run into
Mm.
former students and parents all the time that really thank us for the fact that they had that opportunity. And we know how important education is, and we know how important it is for parents to feel as if they are empowered in the
Yeah,
system. And I think that ultimately helped things open up in the larger public system, where it wasn't that you had to know someone to get
right.
an option. Now you didn't have, you weren't like, as we say, your zip code didn't determine what school you went to. There were a lot more schools that now they have open enrollment you can apply to. And I think that came about because we said, yes, it should be open and parents should have greater choice.
It's amazing that you saw the problem with one family to start and decided to affect the whole system positively. That's amazing. That's amazing.
Thank you. Thank
Can you
you.
talk a little bit about, so, UAC, you are working with lots of folks and partners and collaborations that I'm assuming many you have started. Are there other opportunities in the city that you'd like to see, partnerships that you would like to see emerge? And what types of partnerships and problems would those partnerships tackle?
Well, I think we know absolutely that we have got to work on economic mobility.
Okay.
And I am happy to say that there is a lot that's going on in the city. People would ask me, well, Charmaine, this tax policy is not working well to build
Mhm,
businesses. And I would hear a lot of those discussions, but what I kept saying, in the end, it's jobs,
mhm,
jobs, jobs. When
mhm,
we create economic mobility, which I talked
mhm,
about how excited I am about seeing the poverty numbers go down, we
mhm.
also want to see people not only get past the poverty line, but we want them to be in family sustaining
Right.
environments where they are able to purchase food and pay the rent or buy a house and use transportation, whether it's personal transportation or public transportation. We want them to see that their children can make choices around education, that they can go on to a higher ed or trade school. So we have got to make sure that we are ultimately creating those opportunities. And again, there is a wonderful coalition of people who have come together
Mhm,
from reports. Brookings has written a report. Pew Foundation is at the table.
mhm,
Philadelphia Foundation, of which I'm on the board of, has made this a central part of their ongoing work, as well as William Penn, as well as the Urban Affairs Coalition, and others who are saying the next stage for us is to make sure that we are building wealth and doing it in an effective way. And yes, it's about making sure that people have those opportunities, which means we've got to attract businesses here. We've got to grow our business space. We've got to make sure that there are opportunities for entrepreneurs to be
mhm,
able to start up and set up businesses in our neighborhoods. We've got to make sure that the financial structure around business growth and development is going to be there to help support them. So I think that that's really the next big challenge for us. And I still believe that that poverty report will help fuel the work that we ultimately want to get done there. But I also want to talk about a recent coalition that
mhm,
came together, and that was the Civic Coalition to Save Lives. That
mhm,
has been the work that's been done. And I know you've had a chance to talk to Estelle Richmond, who is an
mhm,
important part of that work. I have been a part of co-chairing that effort as well. Again, business, government, individuals, foundations, everyone coming together. When we looked at the gun violence issue, what do we need to do? First,
mhm,
let's figure out what are we doing that works. Let's continue to support that. And I want to give kudos to the foundations for not saying, okay, it's an either or, it's
mhm,
all of it. But
mhm,
where is it that we need to focus that we haven't focused? And that was on the intervention space. Those were the people who are most likely to be perpetrators or
mhm,
victims of gun violence. How do
mhm,
we make sure that we create economic opportunities, housing opportunities for them so that they ultimately are not going to respond to violence with violence? How do we make sure that the hospitals are a part of that. A lot of the information that ultimately comes from retaliatory shootings comes from hospitals when
Mm.
people hear what's going on with families who are there, and you start looking at the networks of people who've been shot. How do we make sure that that ultimately doesn't happen? So again, Philadelphia has a lot to be proud of from that work. Our numbers have decreased by almost 40%, and we were the biggest decrease of any city in the country. So coalition building
Mhm.
can work. Sometimes it works faster than others, but it always is the most successful model. When Charlie Bowser, my original executive director of the Urban Affairs Coalition, came together with government, business, individuals, community organizations after the assassination of Dr. King in 1968, said, I know that we can do more. I know that we can do more together. I know that we can tackle these challenging issues and challenging problems if we don't allow ourselves to be divided and to believe that only this group can fix it or that group can fix it, and we're all just sort of doing like this as
Right.
opposed to pointing at ourselves to see how we can make a difference.
Yeah, I think that recognizing that it's an ecosystem, right? There's no silos. We're all working together and we can amplify our impact if we work together. So I really appreciate you sharing a little bit about both of the coalition building efforts that have happened. I think that the piece around economic mobility, I just want to also highlight that a lot of the health related social needs are attached to economic mobility, right? So food security,
Mhm.
transportation. So all of the resources that impact health, I think that focusing on economic mobility is a multiplier as well.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely, no
Can you
question.
talk a little bit about perhaps some wisdom that you have learned over the years that has really helped you and guided you?
I think wisdom over the years, again, is that there are some really wonderful, smart people. I used to hear like some quote unquote seniors in my age category sometimes say, oh, you know what? I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if young people are engaged. I'm saying, do you happen to know any young people? Because the ones that I know are absolutely engaged. People call me all the time to be a mentor and to be a
Mhm.
sponsor for them.
Mhm.
We helped to found the Summer Youth Employment Program in the
Okay.
city of Philadelphia. And so that gives us almost like a natural pipeline
Mhm.
into that next generation. So we get to hear their
Mhm.
ideas. So that sort of separation of we're here. So when we talk about coalition building, yes, it
Mhm.
can be across sectors, but it also has to be across age.
Mhm.
And so, again, think of maybe the people and places that you aren't touching, that you aren't connected to. How
Mhm.
can you get connected to young people? How can you make sure that you understand the concerns of the LGBTQ community and bring them in? When the AIDS epidemic occurred, the coalition became the home for programs and services like Colors, like
Mhm.
Galay, like others that were working in ethnic communities and were saying, people in our community are a little afraid of us. And, how do we sort of build again a relationship with our community so that they know we are a part of that community and don't be afraid of us? And the coalition became the place that said, come here, you've got a home here, we will help that happen. When there was tension between the African American community and the Vietnamese community, and
Mhm.
and also which then filtered into the Korean community, the coalition came up with this project called the Thanksgiving Basket Program,
Mhm.
where business leaders in the Asian American community raised funds for us to partner with community groups and organizations and be able to distribute food at Thanksgiving. But that opened the door for conversation, for dialogue, and for
Mhm.
people to begin to ultimately work together. When we took a look at race issues and race relations, a friend of mine, Larry Platt, who is a news guy and also has an organization called Philadelphia Citizen, we decided to put together dinners between people that we knew in the African American community. So people that he knew, people that I knew in the white community, and have a series of dinners where we said, we're going to talk about how we feel and how we're dealing with race, not from a legislative point of view, not from a political point of view, but from your own personal experiences. And how do you ultimately get people to hear you and see you? That
Mm,
was so powerful that people were like, oh my goodness, I didn't know your story, Charmaine, in that way,
mhm,
and vice versa. I didn't know someone else's story when they told me the story. So there are all kinds of things that you can do. Be creative and
mhm,
test and try things and be hopeful. Don't believe that it'll never change, it'll never
mhm,
get fixed. I'm here to tell you, as someone's been around a little bit of time, that
mhm,
yes, it can change. And
mhm,
yes, it can be fixed. It doesn't mean that there's not another challenge tomorrow, because the only thing that's constant is change. But
mhm.
it does mean that we can work on it, we can make a difference, and we can impact people in a very positive way.
Well, your leadership is admirable. You know, you and this brief conversation have talked about looking at macro issues, going in with laser focus solutions, and I'm just so in awe, really,
Oh,
of
thank
your
you. Thank you
mind
very much.
and of
Thank
all the
you.
work that you've done to help so many people.
And
So
there's
thank
been other
you.
people who inspired me. My mom inspired me, my grandmother, people who took a chance on me. Marion Tasco, was just with her this weekend, and when we unveiled a historic marker for her.
Mm,
Roxanne Jones, first African American woman to serve in the Pennsylvania Senate. I was her chief of staff. That was the first time I was, quote unquote, a chief of staff, was with her. So I've been supported and given advice and help all along the way. And the best thing that I can ever do is to make sure that I am doing the same for others.
well, I'm certainly going to add my name to your list of
Please
people
do.
seeking
Please.
mentorship.
Absolutely. It is there. It is there. Call me anytime. Let me know.
Oh,
Anything I
thank
can do to
you.
help, Katrina.
Thank you so much. I so appreciate you coming on today.
You're welcome. Take care.
Take care.